Hey folks, we're gonna get started soon. For those who are online, if you are a technical committee member, you automatically join as an attendee, but I'm trying to promote you to panelists. So please accept that invite if you see it come up on your screen. Thank you.
This is the Fast Planning Technical Committee meeting. It is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024. And the call to order is at 12 o'clock on the dot. For committee members I see present today, I see we have with us Yemi Alini sitting in for Nick Zarnecki, Stephen Hope sitting in for Michelle Denton, Kate Duber, Alexa Green, Brett Nelson, John Tardis, Bob Christash, Walker Ringstead, Bill Rogers, Kellen Spillman, Jacob Toyerick, and John Weinberger. The committee members I see absent at this time include Michael Bradley, Justin Burgess, Lieutenant Mike Roberts, and RJ Stump. So any of those last four names that I mentioned, if you were in the meeting and I just seem to miss you, can you unmute and let us know that you're here? Oh, I see Michael Bradley has joined us.
And RJ Stump.
And RJ Stump, okay. Okay, those are our committee members today. Backward guests here. Okay, for Fast Planning staff, we have myself, Jackson Fox, Olivia Lunsford, Corey Tiviano, and Deborah Todd. And then for guests in the meetings today, I see we have Randy Bailey, Don Galligan, Nathan Stephen, Jack Barnwell, Lauren Little, Cody Laugie, Al Beck, Megan Flory, and Ben White. Are there any other guests in the meetings that didn't announce? If you'd like to announce your presence, you can do that at this time. All right, seeing no other takers. That's who we have with us today. So let's move on to approval of the December 4th, 2024 meeting agenda. Can I get a motion on the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Bill Rogers, second.
I'm giving it to Walker. He raised his hand. Thank you, though, Bill. Okay, any changes to today's agenda? Not hearing any at this time, so anyone opposed to approval of the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will consider it approved. That takes us to approval of the November 6th, 2024 meeting minutes, which are found on pages 2 through 6 of your packet. Can I get a motion on the minutes? All right. Motion made by Bob. Is there a second?
Second, Bill Rogers.
Thank you, Bill. All right, any edits to the minutes? I'm not hearing any edits at this time. Anyone opposed to approval of the minutes as presented in the packet? Hearing none opposed, I consider those approved. That takes us to our staff working group and chair report. Apologize in your agenda, I don't have the page numbers here, but this begins on page 7 and 8 in your packet. Just a brief rundown of the action items of the policy board meeting on November 20th. They did approve both the Max Transit Plan update and the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan. So those have been adopted. We should by Friday be receiving the final PDF versions to post to both our website as well as the Max Transit website. So that work is concluded, and we'll in the new year move into the implementation phase of the recommendations out of those two plans. Second, they did accept the technical committee's recommendation on the FAST Improvement Program and adopted the new project priorities for 2025 and increasing the funding for that program from 1 million up to 2 million. And on page 8 in the packet, you'll see the final clean approved version of the new priorities for 2025, 26, and then contingency project list there. So when we do our next amendment to our transportation improvement program, we'll be adding funding to this program to bring it up to the $2 million level for construction here this coming summer. And then lastly, the policy board approved the 2025 meeting calendar without any further changes. And I believe Olivia will be working on creating calendar cards for technical committee members so that you can see that in a postcard format for all of our committee meeting dates. And we hope to distribute that in January or February. We did that. And that concludes my report at this time. Are there any questions on those items? Okay, seeing none. Let's move on to our public comment period. Is there any member of the public that wishes to provide testimony today to the technical committee on anything not listed as an action item on the agenda? Hopefully we have any public comment in the room, so I'll turn to online. If you do have public comment, please raise your hand and we'll have you unmuted. Comment going once. Once twice. All right, I'm seeing no public comment today for the general public comment period. All right, that takes us to old business, the Fairbanks North Pole Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Implementation Plan, which begins on page 9 in the packet. I'm not going to go through the entire plan with you as we've done in the past, but just to kind of close the loop on this action item here, we did hold a 30-day public comment period from October 13th to November 12th on this plan. Public open house event was held also on November 7th. In total, we received 17 public comments during that comment period, which we presented to the technical committee at your last meeting. We did, following the close of that comment period, we also met with the steering committee for this plan, and we discussed responses to each of the comments. And our consultant team finalized those comment responses and corresponding revisions to the plan as a result of those comments and delivered that back to past planning. So today's action here is we're asking for a recommendation to the policy board on adoption of the final revised plan. Just want to make note of two things. Olivia, if you go to page 23. As a result of some of the public comments received, we did add a new section to the plan, which is an electric vehicle 101 section. And on the following page, page 24, it provides some graphics and description distinguishing between level 1, level 2, and level 3 charging stations and charging types. So this was something that was asked for, and this was really our biggest revision to the plan between the draft version and the final version. And then with regard to the comment responses, if you go to page 77 and then 78, you'll see in an appendix to the plan, we have each of the 17 public comments that we received in a table appended to the plan, which includes the public comment and then the response and action taken in response to each of those comments. So those are the new additions to the electric vehicle plan. And I'm gonna stop there and see if there's any questions for staff on the final revised plan. And Olivia, you can go back to page 9. Yes, Bob.
What was the funding source for the plan again, the basic plan?
Carbon reduction program funds.
What was that amount? You know?
I think it was about 180,000 to develop this plan.
Said ballpark, thanks.
Any other questions for staff on the EV plan? Okay, not hearing any at this time. So I'll move on to the public comment period. Is there any public comment on this plan? In a room or online, so I'll go ahead and close the public comment period. Now I will entertain the motion. Again, we are looking for a recommendation of the policy board on adoption of the final revised electric vehicle infrastructure implementation plan. Yes, Bob.
We recommend, or move to recommend to the policy board that we adopt the new fund plan, drive plan.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second?
Bill Rogers to second.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, any discussion or debate on the motion? Speak up a little. All right, I'm not seeing any discussion or debate or any further questions. I'm just gonna go ahead and, ask if there's any objection to the motion. The motion was to recommend the policy board to adopt the final revised electric vehicle infrastructure implementation plan. Is there anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, seeing none, we'll consider that motion approved unanimously. Now moving on to old business, item 7D, the Alaska DOT 2025 safety performance measure targets. This is an action item for you today. It begins on page 108 in your packet. Just as a reminder to the technical committee, this was an item that was considered at our last technical committee meeting. Action on this item was postponed at that meeting with the request for staff to work with DOT traffic and safety to collect and present fatality and serious injury data for the metropolitan planning area, so that could be compared against the statewide data. On page 109, this is the data that we received from Nathan Stevens and that DOT showing our fatality and serious injury data for the metropolitan planning area for the same years where statewide totals were included from 2016 to 2023. So again, the top table shows fatalities and serious injuries within our area, and then the bottom table there shows statewide, so you can kind of compare and contrast as to what percentage of those fatalities and serious injuries are made up within our area. And Nathan Stevens from DOT is in the room here today, and I believe he has a couple of slides to share with you all. And both he and myself are available for any questions on this item before we consider any action on it.
Okay. Get up front, talk, or
I'm
Wherever
even
you-
right
wherever you
there.
like.
Okay, I'll-
Right there is
It's a
fine.
360 camera.
Okay, thanks. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Nathan Steven. I'm the Regional Traffic and Safety Engineer for Northern Region DOT. So I just threw together some slides to present here. Figured pictures and graphs might be an easier representation of what we're looking at. So first off, disclaimers on our crash data. For official numbers, they have to come out of our statewide office, and the data that I'm using for 2023 as of yesterday is still not certified, so there's that caveat. And then just as some background, earlier this year, we realized that all crashes reported by the city of Fairbanks had not been uploading to our DMV database since 2018. So nothing malicious, just issue with when they updated their IT network, the FTP servers decided to stop talking. But that's been since addressed. We are all caught up. And so anyways, just numbers I present today, if you go back and look from previous performance measure targets, they may differ by some numbers, and that's probably reflected with the change in crashes being reported or not reported by the city of Fairbanks. So go ahead, next slide. Okay, so meeting targets. The top group of data is target set. So that's that memo that comes out from statewide that says this is, so earlier this year in April, I think it was sent out. So these are our targets for 2025. And the bottom group of data is actuals based on the 5-year rolling average. So I went ahead and compared Well, it says right there, green shadow shaded boxes, indicate performance measure targets that were met. So, and then, see, another thing, the notes, oh, yeah, so, one of the questions I got asked was if we had any, do we know actual safety performance measure data for 2024 year yet? No, we don't, but, the one thing we do know so far from our FARS analysts is that, as of last night, this morning, there's been 67 fatalities, this year. And so for our 2024 target of, not exceeding 75 fatalities, we're, the rate we're on is for 73 to 74 fatalities. So that's the only thing that I can report on that. And that's including the 2 fatalities on Sunday and the one, yesterday on the Thatcher. Yeah, so, okay, next slide, performance measures. So,
Next question.
yeah, go for it.
Could you go back to the last slide? So just so I'm understanding, so I understand the top chart, the bottom chart, are those actuals or are those the averages of the above chart on a 5-year roll-in?
Yeah, good question. So, the average of 5 years. So for 2020, on the bottom, the 5-year rolling average, that's the average of, 2016 through 2020. So those 5 years, 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, so the 5-year average.
But it's the average of the targets and not actuals.
Sorry, those are the actuals.
Those are the actuals.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand, I think.
Okay, and I think we could probably pull that off of the next slide. Because I have statewide, so 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20. If you add all those up in 5 by 5, it should be 78 or whatever that was for the rolling 5 years, so. Anyways, I got asked, this is just an updated slide from the table I provided Jackson with, 2 weeks ago, or whenever that was, just because. Did a deeper dive on their data, so yeah, this is essentially the same stuff, but. Going to the next few slides. It'll show, I just broke it down into graphs, so we could look at it and view it there easier. I put this up, this is the highway performance monitoring system. This comes out of our data modernization innovation office, our transportation, you go back.
There.
Yeah, there, this is just where I'm getting our rates, help me calculate our rates from. And in the bottom left there, it says there's a group, it's grouped out for Fairbanks for urbanized area summary. It's not exactly to the MPO boundaries, and this is like transportation planners. I haven't had a chance to talk about what it looks like, but this is pretty close to what we had asked if we could figure out for exactly lane that miles traveled and everything for the MPO. And they've just started breaking it down for Fairbanks. The last, what did I say, 2020, they started doing that. So that's as far back as we can go to break down that. So, okay, Olivia, next slide. And then these are just, oh, sure.
I'm gonna go back 2 slides. Maybe dumb question, so when we're saying fatality rate and serious injury rate, we're indexing that versus million vehicle miles traveled, correct?
100 million vehicles.
100
miles
million
traveled. Yes.
vehicles, okay.
And so that's why I threw, I think on the next slide there, that's where these are going. So the daily vehicle rates on the right for Fairbanks are for 2023, scroll down, 1.6 million vehicle miles, so then times that by 365 for the but yeah, sorry, did that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Got lost. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so here's our performance measures just from that previous table. Showing the difference between statewide and, the fast planning MPO boundaries. For the rates. And I threw a trend line in as well to see kind of how everything's panning out. So fatalities, serious injuries, and then, the rates. So, anyways, you could see trend analysis, and this is all things that the working group looks at, for determining what they're presenting for their safety performance, measure targets each year. So yeah. Report on if we met targets usually comes out in April. Also have notes on, so, yeah, any further questions?
Thank you, Nathan. But yes, any further questions for Nathan or myself? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Alan.
first of all, thank you for this information.
Sure.
I've been asking about this, I think, for 7 years, and I think everyone's been frustrated with me because I bring it up every time. But I appreciate this. This is exactly what I've been looking for. And this is an incredible data, and I'd love to keep tracking this because I think this tells a great story. I guess my question for you is, it seems like the two data points that are really apples to apples, pardon my jargon, is fatality rate and serious injury rate. That we could compare how we're doing with the state. Does that sound correct?
Yeah.
And in general, I think there's one outlier year, the fatality rate in 2020, but in general, across the board, it seemed like Fairbanks had a lower fatality rate and a lower serious injury rate than the statewide average and significantly lower than the performance measures that we were requesting. Do you agree with that? Steve?
Yeah, there was 1 year, I think you're right, it was 2020, that the rate, we just barely jumped above, statewide. Yeah, 2020, we were 1.26 and the statewide was 1.24, so. But yeah, everything else fell under that rate, so if you're looking to compare us to statewide, then yeah,
So in simple terms, we're doing better than the state and we're doing better than the performance measure, the performance targets that we adopt every year, correct?
correct.
Okay. Am I missing something or is it that simple?
I think it's that simple. I mean, if you're just comparing it, if you're looking at the rates, then yeah, correct.
Okay. It may be a bigger question. I'm not asking you to speculate. Is it Anchorage that's inflating the statewide numbers or?
I haven't gone that far yet. That was a question that I thought to myself when I was going through this to see if we're so low, what's higher to make lower than that average, but yeah, that would be
Okay.
interesting to.
I appreciate it. Thanks again for the
Okay.
presentation.
Sure, yeah, you bet.
All right, we don't want to get into discussion or debate, but, any further questions?
Yeah, one
Go
question.
ahead, Bob.
Was there a page here that showed, an average slope, I think? That one right there. So the statewide fatality rate, that slope looks like it's going down faster than ours. Is that right?
Yes,
So their rate is getting better than ours, right?
This is the number of
Total
fatalities,
number.
not a rate.
Wasn't that slope, kind of a rate? You took it anywhere along that line? I mean, maybe not. But
The
it-
next slide has to be.
Keep going, another one.
There you go.
There you go, that's it.
Again, it's the same thing. Maybe it's just, we're not doing any worse for sure.
right, and we have such
It
a
looks like
low,
the statewide doing better to me when I look at this, but by a
Yeah.
small amount.
and I don't know. statistical analysis,
Yeah.
we're such a small
We're right.
TMBT versus the state with, like, we probably were doing great up till last week, and now we added 3 fatalities in the last week, where
Yeah, I understand.
annually we average 4.5 within the MPO boundaries. So we have unfortunate,
But adopting the
We-
state
the-
standards or the targets doesn't really hurt us any.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Adopting the state targets doesn't hurt us any, I don't think, by looking at it. That's the only question I had.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, not seeing it at this time. I'm gonna go ahead and open this up for public comment before we entertain a motion. Is there any public comment on this item here today?
If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand so I can give you permission to speak if you do want to provide a public comment.
Okay, I'm not seeing any public comment at this time. So we're gonna, go ahead and open up the floor now to a motion. Again, this was postponed from the last meeting, so we are looking for a motion. As I discussed during our meeting last month, really what the 2 options that the committee has before them today is to either recommend to the policy board to support the state's 2025 adopted safety targets, or direct staff to begin working on developing our own safety targets for the metropolitan planning area. If anybody would like to make either of those motions or a different motion. Go ahead, John.
I'll make a motion. I'll move to support the state's adopted safety targets for 2025.
Okay, thank you, John.
I'm sorry, recommended the policy board to support.
Recommended policy. Okay, is there a second for that? All right, John, the target's got it. All right, discussion, debate, further questions? Yes, Colin.
Again, big thank you for the DOT for putting these numbers together. I think it makes the most sense to support the state's targets. There are no penalties associated with this. My little caveat is I really would like to see us keep tracking this data to see how it improves or doesn't every year. And just especially comparing with the statewide averages, I think it's a good, not official performance target that we should have, but unofficial performance target to keep tracking that and just seeing and maybe even identifying hotspots to eventually look at some of our projects in those areas. But as far as the federal requirements of just supporting the state targets, I think it's easier, cheaper, and
Further discussion or debate? Okay, I'll go ahead and call the question then. Is there anyone opposed to approval of the motion? The motion was to recommend to the policy board to support the state's 2025 adopted safety targets. Okay, hearing none opposed, we'll consider that motion approved. All right, that takes us to item 8A underneath new business, the federal fiscal year 2023 through 2027 transportation improvement program amendment. This is an informational item here today. There's no action. This begins on page 117 in the packet. So as I discussed with the technical committee last month, I am working on an amendment to our transportation improvement program. I've put together a summary here of what's going to be included as what we call major changes, things that would trigger an amendment to our transportation improvement program or our TIP, as well as a number of minor changes, which typically would fall underneath an administrative modification. I am working on developing or trying to develop an initial draft of this amendment in our regular TIP format by Friday of this week to share internally with DOT staff and their project managers to review all their projects. My hope is that I'm able to schedule an interagency consultation meeting, on this amendment, to share with our federal partners what we're working on. And of course, we have to be careful with our conformity freeze on, what can qualify under an amendment during conformity freeze with regard to projects that are exempt versus non-exempt. So I'm hoping to accomplish that this month and then bring the actual draft amendment, to the technical committee and policy board in January, for consideration of releasing it for a 30-day public comment period. So this is kind of the start of a multi-month long process. But to give you an overview of what I'm working on right now, and a lot of this is based on what I see in the PDPs, project development plans, that I have access to from DOT. At this time, for major changes, we're looking at adding into our TIP 5 new highway safety improvement program projects. Adding construction-based funding for 2 existing highway safety improvement program projects. Removing 1 project that has already been constructed. Adding in 4 discretionary grant-funded projects. And then adding funding to 2 programs, one of which is the preventative maintenance program, and another one is the ADA improvements program. And then for minor changes, we are going to have an update to the format of our TIP. In addition to just updating need IDs and project numbers, we will be including columns that show detail on total project cost, including the years prior to what you see in the active years of the TIP. I'm adding the termini and project length to each of the project descriptions, and then an identification for each project, whether or not those are exempt or non-exempt projects. We're also going to remove 4 illustrative projects from the TIP table and relocate that into the TIP narrative. And then, based on the PDPs that we received, there are 5 projects where the construction phase has been delayed at least 1 or 2 years. So those changes will be reflected. 1 project has a utility phase that's been delayed by 1 year. And 1 project that is in design and has a new construction funding estimate that we're putting in the beyond years column at this time. The planned construction for that is in 2028 beyond the years of the TIP, but it's simply just to update the estimated amount for construction. So more details on the specific projects are found on pages 118 and 119. I won't necessarily go through all of these line by line with you, but for right now, this is my working list from what I see in the PDPs that I received from DOT, as well as communications from Nathan on some of the new highway safety improvement program projects. And then on page 120, it shows you the overall schedule, which I kind of described at the onset of this item, as far as what work I hope to accomplish during the month of December to get this advanced to the technical committee and policy board in January for a release for a 30-day public comment period. The public comment period right now, I'm projecting it to be January 17th to February 16th. Following that, there'll be additional revisions likely to be made and comments to resolve. So we would be bringing that amendment back for approval by the technical committee and policy board at the March meetings. Again, doing an amendment to our TIP is a months-long process, and here are my preliminary dates with this schedule I'm trying to go for. If that's all I have, I'm open to any questions. And again, I hope to have an official draft of this by Friday that I can share with anyone and everyone. It's most important that DOT sees it and the project managers see that to make sure that the correct funding amounts and the correct years in which these different phases will occur are accurate in that document. Any comments or questions or any discussion on this? Go ahead, Bob.
So, specifically, Barnett, if that's moved from, I guess the illustrative to the narrative, does that affect the beginning of any design funding?
No, it doesn't, provided that it's right now illustrative in our TIP table. That any time that we add federal money to it, it would trigger an amendment to the TIP. So no matter where it's located within our document, whether it's in the table or it's in the narrative, to provide to do a project start to add federal money to initiate a design phase will still trigger an amendment for that. At this time, I don't believe that that project is exempt from air quality conformity, so we may not be able to start that project until the conformity freezes lifted.
Right.
But that wouldn't be something subject of this amendment at this time. We'll have to wait. I don't know if it's gonna be 6 months or year when the conformity freezes lifted, but we'll have to wait until that occurs to consider initiating the project start.
One more question.
Yes,
So is the intent to eliminate that column then from the tip unless it's a project?
yes,
Oh, no.
yes.
All right.
But we don't want to forget about those because those illustrative projects are what we consider to be grandfathered into the funding plan should additional funding become available. So we don't want to remove them entirely. We just want to relocate them to the narrative so that they're still there. Because these are projects that have already been scored by the technical committee and they're kind of next in line to receive.
But that
funding.
column's gonna be eliminated. You won't have.
Yes, in the table, yeah. You'll have to go to the narrative to find which projects are illustrative.
All right, thank you.
Are there questions or comments?
Just maybe a bigger picture question. So the 5 projects that the construction phase is slipping and the one that the utility phase is slipping. Do we have concern about fully expending all of our funding in the coming years because of the slipping projects?
Yes, we do. And one example would be, at this time, the Chena Riverwalk is being pushed out from 2025 to 2027 in our funding plan. So that creates a $1.7 million hole that we need to fill. So by Friday, once I have this draft amendment prepared, I will know how much unprogrammed funds we have in 2025 and 2026. But once I have that information, I will be circulating with the DOT project manager to see if there's any additional needs for funding so that we can program that in the tip. Those new needs are not identified in here, but yes, when these projects slip from one construction year to the next construction year, it creates a hole. And we need to program that funding on something else. So those are going to be decisions that need to be made this month and next in coordination with the technical committee. Now, I'm hearing that there are some additional needs on Powell Street and potentially Holmes Road. We can, of course, we can of course also add some of the funding to the fast improvement program, some of the contingency projects to soak some of that up. But yes, it's quite the gymnastics. These types of changes occur to shuffle funding around.
Kind of follow it.
Yes.
Maybe this is a bigger discussion and just an update on the tip, but it seems like even going back to when I worked for the MPO, we had this problem, just not enough shovel-ready projects. I'd love to just try to come up with some ideas of how to get more shovel-ready projects. We don't have this scramble when things are delayed. So that was more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, I agree with you. Is there questions or? Go ahead, Bob.
The city budget was just passed the other day, the second reading, and in there's design funding for the storm drain improvements on Joyce. And Joyce, it's one of our service improvement projects that's scheduled for 26. So with that funding, and the city's done some preliminary surveying already, actually fully surveyed of Joyce. That project would be in line with what you're talking about for shovel ready to expend some of the service improvement of funding when this gap materializes. And on Cowles itself, everybody knows that those poles weren't included in the original design. When you drive down Cowles, you can see the problem with those poles. If some of that money could be used to reconsider that design from the perspective of putting that stuff underground. So that design would be, it's ready now to go, but the final product would be better if those poles were underground. So if we designed that with that money, then that project would be shovel ready too.
Any,
Just a comment.
any just even off the cuff guesses on what it would take to put the utilities underground on
The
Cowles?
total cost, We have to revisit the environmental document because the area of potential effect is too small. Because we gotta go sideways, east and west. We run the north-south power line underground. You have to reconnect east and west. So the environmental document has to be redone. Maybe it's a reeval, I don't know, but to design it, it'd probably be about 400 and then to put it underground about 3 million. $4 million, something like that.
I know we're getting really off topic here,
It's okay,
but I think it's a good conversation. I think that's a fantastic consideration. I think it's things we should talk about. I remember 2010, we had the same consideration on Wendell and ended up leaving the utilities up on Wendell, and I think that would have been a big improvement on that street. I know it was really costly there, but yeah, I really appreciate these ideas. I think these are really good ideas to throw out and talk about when we're talking about the tip, because it seems our knee jerk a lot of times is just adding more projects to the improvement program, which is also beneficial. That's it.
Sure. Thank you, thank you, Bob. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, stay tuned for the release of that kind of preliminary draft tip amendment, so that folks can take a look at that before we advance it to release it in the comment. Right, our next item underneath new business is item 8A, the new interim guidance for congestion mitigation and air quality program, we call our CMAQ program. This begins on page 121 of the packet. And I did not include a copy of the new guidance, but I just want to make everybody aware that there is new guidance that's been issued by the Federal Highway Administration on CMAQ funding in this program, of course, which we benefit from in our area due to our 2.5 issue. The current guidance that we're working underneath is from November 2013. So 11 years later, there is new published guidance. And it's not really that long. It's 44 pages. On the next page there at the very bottom, if you'd like to see, if you'd like to download a copy of the new guidance, there's a web link at the very bottom. But with the publication of this guidance, there is a 60-day comment period, which ends on January 6, 2025. I have reviewed the guidance and at this time, I don't intend to bring a comment letter forward through the technical committee and policy board. Most of what I see in the new guidance, I think that we would generally support. I don't see any red flags in my mind that we would be important to us to submit comments. But if you want to see some of the cliff notes of what some of the changes are in the new guidance, this is found on pages 123 and 124. The National Association of NPOs put together a really good summary of what some of those changes are. A couple of these to highlight. Under performance measures, states and NPOs must implement the Federal Highway Administration's defined performance measures. I don't believe we've considered any action on our CMAQ targets. These are similar to the safety targets. There's also CMAQ air quality targets. We haven't considered any of those for 5 or 6 years. So in any event, it puts a little bit more beef behind that. The guidance incorporates cost effectiveness tables to help us prioritize our projects that have the highest emission reductions for the least amount of money. And then some of the CMAQ projects are actually funding it. The new guidance may qualify some of those projects for 100% federal share, so it would be waiving the match requirement. So a couple examples are roundabouts and traffic signalization projects, where potentially we would have to pay any match on those using our CMAQ funds. And then on the next page, page 124 at the top, just one more to highlight here. There's a heightened focus on equity for disadvantaged populations. So priority would be given to projects that benefit low-income or disadvantaged communities, especially in PM 2.5 non-attainment areas. So that definitely relates to us in our program and the projects that we select for use of CMAQ funds. So this is something I'm going to kind of dive into further, especially before our next call for projects for air quality funding. But I'm excited that that guidance has been updated and modernized to get it in sync with the latest transportation bill. And I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. Okay, not seeing at this time. So we are gonna move on to new business item 8C, update from Alaska DOT on federal planning findings meetings with the Federal Higher Administration. And I see Catherine Keith online has her hand up. So Catherine, you have the floor.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, sorry I can't be there in Fairbanks with you. I'm down here in Juneau where it's raining. Quite the change in weather for sure. So one thing, thanks Jackson for the update on the tip, and very glad to hear that that PDP plan and being able to go in there is perhaps helping. I did notice in looking at that we're still short of maybe 8 or 10 project estimates. And so over this next week, we'll be sure to go through those and make sure we have them uploaded so that as you're populating the table with total project costs, you can reference those. Yeah, so please keep us posted if there's information that you're not getting. That would be helpful as you pull things together. So at the same time, as the TIP is rolling out, we are going through the same parallel process with the STIP. So just for everyone's awareness, we're pulling together our draft STIP and looking to put that out for public comment starting January 4th, so after the holidays, and that would be a 30-day period for us. So backtracking that, we do want to take a 2-week period. It'll probably like starting on December 15th, where we'll have the opportunity to take the draft document that the FAST planning has, and then put that together with the STIP draft. And I think finally we'll be at this point that we've been working towards where we have our documents in sync so that the fiscal constraint sections should line out, which has been on the topic of federal planning findings, one of those recurring themes. So one thing, you know, perhaps this is something, if there's comment time or discussion time, working through what that period of time could look like if we have 2 weeks prior to public comment, and being respectful of the fact that we don't want to, you know, get ahead of the public comment process, but to look at the documents over a couple week period, even if it's the holidays, to talk through these things. So maybe a placeholder on that topic, but unless you'd like to dive into that now.
Sorry, was that a question for me?
Yeah. Would you like to talk through that review period, or do you want to circle back to that after we go through some of these topics?
We can circle back to that. I mean, the item on the agenda today is an update on the federal planning and finding meetings with Federal Highway Administration.
Yeah, so that ties in. One of the planning findings that we've been working on is the 3C process and how we're coordinating. And so getting our TIP and STIP on the same schedule is very critical for that process. So yeah, just glad that we're getting close to that. So yeah, we had made some significant progress with Federal Highways and Federal Transit Administration, where last week we had traveled to Washington, D.C., or I'm sorry, it was 2 weeks ago on the November 20th and 21st. So we had meetings over a 2-day period to address some of those outstanding issues that we had received from Amendment 1 on September 26th. So those findings, which I'm sure this technical committee is familiar with, included regulatory compliance, fiscal constraint, and public engagement process. So, and in that most recent findings, there was a letter in there from Federal Highways and FTA that said they would like for the department to come up with an action plan for those corrective actions. So we did prepare that and sent that back to the federal agencies. And in that, we did say that we needed to clarify that of the 14 actions outstanding from the original STIP, we considered all of them resolved, and we're challenging the characterization of what the 4 outstanding items were from the perspective of federal highways and federal transit. So we talked through those concerns, which were, regarding handling of public comments, the format of the fiscal constraint, our 3C process, and other items that have been talked about. We also talked more about the rejected discretionary grant projects because that has been a difficult topic to get precise clarification on, and we talked through our advanced construction tools, as well as some of the project specifics, such as the Safe Route Seward Highway Corridor and then the Richardson Highway Chena Bridge Replacement Project. So those were all wrapped into an agenda, and we had 4 of us from Alaska: Commissioner Anderson, myself, Don Panone, who's Director of Program Management and Administration, and Sean Lynch, who's our Chief Assistant Attorney General. And Federal Highways had their Executive Director, Gloria Shepard, as well as their Planning Directors, Kenneth Petty, Emily Biondi, and FTA as well had their Associate Administrator for Planning and Environment, Mark Ferroni. So there are 16 FHWA and FTA representatives, and the 4 of us, and we just kind of worked through line item by line item through the findings. And I'm sorry, I should mention that also Sandra Garcia Lean, our Alaska Federal Highways Office head, and Gerald Barney had traveled out there as well. So everyone did take the time to go and work through these things together. So on the first day, we focused in on the MPO coordination, tribal engagement, and public involvement. And then the second day, we focused on fiscal constraint, the performance management, and some of our advanced construction processes. As a result of that, we did get clarity on a lot of topics. And then some we just needed to commit to working together on moving forward. One thing on the topic of discretionary grants, because I noticed, Jackson, that's an item that is listed in the items to change within the tip. But surprisingly, USDOT does not have a comprehensive list of their grant programs that are required to be in a STIP or a TIP. So between all of the federal agencies, what we were requesting was that they just give us a list of what they need in order to keep the projects moving forward. Our directions and our findings was that we needed to be programming the discretionary grants by grant program, by year in which it was awarded, and that our fiscal constraint table then needed to reflect both the year that it was awarded and then the year of obligations for those grants. And if you've looked at our fiscal constraint tables, that's a substantial amount of detail. And in some cases, we weren't correct in what had to be included and what didn't. And that's where you saw 19 projects that they wanted removed from our STIP, but those are discretionary grants, which were ambiguous in their NOFOs and in the regulations about their inclusion. So we asked for a list, but they don't have one. There's nothing that they could give us. They wish that they had one. So the result of that moving forward is we're just going to have to work on that, likely not being a finding, but just something that we all work on to improve moving forward. Another topic that's relevant is the census data boundary updates and the timeline for that. So with the release of that and this has to do with our boundary discussions, but with the release of the 2020 census data that they released in 2022, both FHWA and FTA were on the same page that they have the 4 years after that date in 2022 to have those updates incorporated, which gets us to December 29, 2026. So we have, as we're going through this process, that time for the collaboration and reviewing anything that may be outstanding as we move forward. But then projects that are outside of the current boundary, which included the Richardson Highway Chena Bridge project, as that is not within the current approved boundary, does need to be included on the STIP document and not the TIP document. And that came from the Executive Director of Federal Highways. So we're getting that clarification in writing, which will be helpful for everyone, so we can just all be looking at the same thing. And then we'll work through the best way to navigate just programming that in, as it had already been out for public comment, And so likely can just keep moving forward instead of waiting for amendment number 2 on our side. We also talked through other fiscal constraint topics like the railroad fund programming. And that'll be something in addition to the updates that are here listed for the tip. One of the findings had to do with the railroad and the FTA fiscal constraint sections, which they have been over programmed and dispersed between the MPOs and the state. So we had we've met with the railroad sorting out how we can do that moving forward. And so I think everybody's on the same page there. So that won't be a recurring if finding. And then, yeah, moving forward, our collective plan with these is to work as well with federal highways and the NPOs, and the policy boards, the technical committees, to be sure that we're having this ample opportunity, even if it's a couple weeks, to go through any items in the STIP to make sure that we're addressing those findings, with our goal in this next amendment just to have, no outstanding findings, so that everyone is, seeing things on making sure that we're communicating and able to see and understand the regs and the statutes in the same way. So I think it probably gets us to the highlights of that, but I am happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Any members have any questions for Catherine? Yep, Helen, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. I appreciate the update, Ms. Keith. One question, I apologize if this is a dumb question. When you said discretionary grants, could you just give me an example of what would fall under that to be included in the STIP?
Yeah, absolutely. For funding, we have our formula funds that are very predictable through our apportionment tables that are issued every year. And the discretionary funding is really anything other than that. And typically what becomes challenging is when they're competitive grants, such as the Protect funds are one example. The RAISE, or some of the Protect, are both grant and formula. The RAISE infrastructure grants, the MEGA grants that are for larger projects are. So those ones that you're applying for, submitting a grant application for, when they get awarded, they need to be added into a document. If there are certain things that comply, like if they need to be Title 23 compliant, if they need to be Title 49 compliant, and then furthermore, in addition to that, if that's listed in the NOFO somewhere that they need to be, or that it doesn't exclusively say that they don't not need to be. So and that's where the confusion came in. So it's those funds, even if we're applying for them. So it'd be anyone, any awardee within the MPA of fast planning purview that's awarded, you would want to include that in your tip.
Would this include CMAQ funds, or are you classifying that as the kind of normal appropriations?
Yep, that'd be the normal formula fund distribution. So that would not be included.
And then just maybe one more broader question, if I may. I really apologize about a lot of what you said is a little bit over my head. I'm just not in this every day. In your meetings you had with federal highways, in your opinion, does it sound like there's a path to going forward, that we're all in kind of agreement with something? I think the biggest thing, at least I'm concerned about, would be potentially losing a year of programming for not having a STIP approved. Did that make sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think we're all eager to be able to spend our time focusing on, improved processes and project delivery. So yeah, I had very high confidence that from that, we have some clear paths moving forward. And there are certainly outstanding things that we disagree on, but I think we even have a path towards resolution on those items. that won't hold back project delivery or put our overall federal program at risk. That being said, we're just constantly looking at what we need to do to get us there, and how we need to work together better. So yeah, short answer is yes, feeling confident that we are understanding the path forward to have a smooth STIP amendment number 2.
Yes, go ahead. My final question, it's somewhat on topic. It was last year, right, I'm sorry, it was this last summer that my understanding was the state DOT and the 3 MPOs kind of sat down in a series of meetings in Anchorage and went through and worked out the document on how we kind of all work together and put it on paper. And I believe the 3 MPOs officially commented on this. I know we officially commented on this and had several suggested edits, particularly with the STIP development section of that document. Do you know if there's going to be an updated version of that document to keep working through?
Yeah, that is a document that I think we've all considered to be a live document, that we had all of the MPOs, technical and policy, look through it, and we made those and incorporated those edits. But yes, we should do another deep dive, and internally we're looking at that procedural side so that we're at least clear on like as part of our planning manual, what could be incorporated there, and then how can we include that in an overall 3C process where it ties into what other entities are doing too. So yeah, we should, and it would be a recommendation if the technical committee is open to that, but let's keep that on a rolling agenda item at some point too, so we can be sure to have ample time to review those. Ideally, we're going to formally adopt that together, and would be a great goal. Whereas right now it's a draft. So
I really appreciate that. I'd love if we could have that on the next technical committee agenda. I just haven't seen the version since the kind of red line version. And I saw MVP and AMAX's comments and our comments as well. So yeah, I'd really appreciate seeing the updated version of that. And I appreciate your willingness to continue those conversations.
Good, thanks, Kellen. Any other questions from committee members? Ms. Keith? Okay, not seeing it this time, so let's move on to our last item on the new business, item HD, the last with DOT Metropolitan Planning Area Boundary Review and proposed revisions to the intergovernmental operating agreement. This is an action item here today. I'll turn it over to a DOT representative here in a moment for an introduction. Following that introduction, we'll have time for questions from committee members, a public comment period, and then we'll entertain a motion after you hear the introduction. So I don't know if this is you again, Catherine, or if there's another DOT representative to speak to this item.
yeah, thanks, Jackson. I can kick us off, and then if there's any of our team that has some further comment, then it'd be great for them to jump in. But yeah, we have 2 topics here that are somewhat related, and that's the operating agreement update, as well as the MPO boundary adoption. And on the operating agreement side, we've had a draft that we've reviewed primarily to ensure that it's up to date with our state statutes, federal CFRs, and we've called out in the track changes version where we've seen that there are areas that we collectively would want to have updated. And our goal is to have the governor approve the boundary extension, as is required by statute, and the operating agreement at the same time, because any of the substantial changes within the MPO operating agreement then warrant that update, and having the boundary extension included in the operating agreement update as one package is our goal and the reason that you're seeing or hearing about us tying the two together. So if we want to look through the operating agreement, I'm happy to touch on some of the points within that. It includes items related to clarification of the MPO and how the policy board representing as the MPO. There's MPO coordination on NHS routes, which do warrant some further conversation. There's just language within the MPO self-certification process, alignment of the MTP with the state LRTP. There's some comments in there about air quality and SIP coordination, public participation. But again, most of this is just to update it with the statutes and regulations needed to stay in compliance. And these are the reviews that we're doing at all three of the MPOs. So this isn't something that's specific. This is part of our overall federal planning findings and the update of our stewardship and oversight agreement, where just want to make sure that everything is consistent, especially when going to the governor for approval. We need a legally accurate document ahead of his signature. So how would you like to proceed as far as the operating agreement piece goes? You want to go kind of change by change or just general questions?
I think the best way to do this, I mean, we have about an hour left of the meeting, and this is obviously a very important topic here. So I'm hoping that you can walk through each of the edits kind of section by section, and then maybe within each section, allow opportunity for committee members to ask questions during the introduction to those. I did put together a table so that this is consolidated down into 4 pages. That begins on page 154.
Yeah.
This might be, I thought this might be a good tool to kind of listen to what the intent of the language additions are, and then for technical committee members to make any notes or comments for themselves and offer opportunity for questions. So the first series of edits is section 3, legal authority. The top row there shows you the language that's included in the current fast planning operating agreement. And then beside that is the language that's included in the Matsu operating agreement. And then below that is the proposed edits that are also in the meeting packet here. But let's start out with this one, and then we'll got a couple more pages here to work through the other sections. So
Okay.
Can I clarify one thing real quick? Catherine, just so there's no confusion here. You guys' agreement is the first one that's been gone through. So we fully recognize that all of the operating agreements need the same edits. Joe started this effort and he was fast playing policy board for the first agreement that got evaluated to this level of detail. Just wanted to clear the intent of the uniform changes. You just are going first.
okay, thanks, Lauren. Back to you, Catherine.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's start with section 3. That's the legal authority section. And so we have changes there in 3.1 and then some additional sections, 3.1 subpart 2, 3, and 4. So these sections are focused on just clarification to ensure almost that it's incorporating language directly from those particular statutes. So here we have regulations that are implementing 23 USC 103 B3 and then 23 CFR 470 is the source of these. And then we have Alaska statute 19.20 and 015. So I know we'll just be throwing out a lot of the regulations here. So I just encourage those that are interested, just look them up, and it's pretty helpful to give us an understanding of the reason for this. Maybe I'll just pause there for questions.
All right, questions from committee members on section 3 legal authority as shown on page 154. Yep, Kellen, go ahead.
How I guess, I have a number of questions. How technical do we want to get in this setting? Like,
We're a technical committee.
okay. So, Ms. Keith, I'm looking specifically at, AS 1920 200 through 220. The
Mhm.
citation in 3.1.2. And, AS 19.20.210, membership in policy boards of metropolitan planning areas. So I'm reading the statute, it's pretty clear it's specific to TMAs, so designated TMAs over 200,000 people. That's the first line of the statute. So we're not a TMA, why do we want to cite this statute in our operating agreement?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So part of this, I would say it's two parts. One is consistency across the MPOs. But then here, I believe the intent of 200 to 2.20 is just focused on the official designation of the MPOs and then the correlation, because it does tie in the planning authority for the let's see, none of the fast planning member municipalities have requested DOT's planning authority. Okay, sorry, I'm looking at too many documents, I think is the issue.
I'm looking at 3.1.2, so the statute under membership of policy boards of metropolitan planning organizations.
And I'm not seeing the TMA in that statutory reference. It's all MPOs.
But it's specific with 200,000 persons.
When I read a population of more than 50,000. For 200.
Oh, I'm looking at 210.
Oh, okay.
210 is specific.
Yeah, I think perhaps what that recommended edit would be here is just not to include a range. Because it's referencing the range of them, but then we would not want to include things that are related to the TMA at this point. So that would be good clarifying language to add.
All right, John. Can I ask who drafted this section?
This is primarily the State Department of Law, who would be making recommendations in any legal documents.
And then the same Alaska statutes, Alaska 1920 220 does reference back to 221, which again ties that to 200,000 persons. So I guess I'm getting a little uncomfortable here. I'm not a lawyer and I'm really struggling with this. I'm just reading the statute and trying to apply it here. So I'm getting a little uncomfortable, potentially acting on something that, our legal team hasn't gone through. We're a signature on this. And this is, just my hour plus review of this going into this meeting. So I'm really uncomfortable with this section. I have some other questions about other sections, but I will just put on the record, I'm uncomfortable with adding 3.1.2, the citations of the Alaska statutes, which I just really don't think they pertain to our organization.
Yeah, maybe just a follow-up comment to that is this topic right now is to go through this and just for all of us to become familiar and have conversations about these items. I don't believe the expectation right now is that even though it's marked as an action item, the action is that we're continuing to work on this agreement. And if there's a recommendation moving forward from this, either for further like a working group or something, that would be fantastic. But we are noting these, talking through them, working on this so that we can get to a place where we have of an agreement and a boundary approved. So.
So I'm reading the memo from Commissioner Anderson, and the request was to have this formal action on the technical committee and policy board to adopt the proposed edits. The request was November, we're into December now, so
Mhm.
are we not gonna take action?
The request, and I can clarify that, the request is when there's consensus that this is a document that we mutually agree is is appropriate. So it's not to have a deadline on that, as we do have some time before our timeline runs out on the boundary expansion. So this isn't something that is required, but the request has been, we've wanted to talk through this since June or July, and we're just eager to have these conversations so we can have an updated document. But it does need this type of discussion and review. That's all.
Right, John?
The action item that's listed on our agenda here, are we, I mean, it could be, we can make a motion what we want, but is the requested action to, recommend to the policy board that we adopt this?
I did not include what any recommended action would be. So,
Okay.
because I don't know what the request from DOT is at this time for this document.
All right,
So it's listed as an action item,
Good.
but the clarity on what DOT is asking for should come from DOT. So
okay,
Catherine would have to let us know what actions you would like the committee to consider.
it sounded like, I won't put, words in her mouth here, but it sounded like, the request was to consider it and, but there's nothing recommended to the policy board today, just to start this review of this document. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct, sir. Yes, our request has been to the mayor and executive director through letters that we would like to get together to please review this document so that we can have a pathway moving forward. And this is the just first meeting to be able to work through this and find a pathway that works for everybody. So there is not a requirement for a formal recommendation to the policy board, but when we are ready for that, then we just look forward to being able to do so, but that isn't a requirement of today.
Thank you.
Right, Colin?
Hey. Sorry, I'm just again reading them out. So is the policy board expecting to hear this as an action item at their next meeting?
Jackson, do you want to comment on where the agenda's at?
Based on the comments made by our new chair, Jerry Clear at the last meeting, we'd like to see this. We wanted to see this on the technical committee meeting for today, as well as the policy board meeting on December 19th. It's going to be. So regardless of what motions or lack of motions are made today, this is going to advance to the policy board at their next meeting. Whether it's an action item or not, I don't know at this time, but I'll have to defer to the chair on that.
So what we'd like to do is, as we go through these sections, notice where there is ambiguity, or like for section 3, I think it was Callum, you was noticing that needing the clarification, why is this referencing AS 1920, 200? How, why is this applying, even though that this FAST is in a TMZ? So that we need to have some clarifying language in there so that as we talk through this moving forward, either this applies, it doesn't apply, but we need greater clarification in those answers so we can provide those answers in writing so that as we move this forward, we can flesh out the language and at least be making progress on it. So.
Yeah, Colin.
Can I ask maybe a bigger question? I was somewhat involved in the 2019 update. And it was a pretty long process. It took countless meetings and I think 4 different lawyers involved. It was a little bit of a process.
Yes.
And I thought we had a good draft, and I believe Federal Highways reviewed that. I'm just having a little bit of a hard time understanding the need to update the agreement again. Could you maybe just give me a little more clarity to that?
Yeah, sure. Well, that agreement, yeah, that was 5 years ago. Clearly, we're seeing a different application of process and how we are running our transportation programs. Both fast planning and the state have seen that, and a increased focus on ensuring that our documents, our planning work, our projects, that they are fully compliant with federal regs and law. So that's the impetus for going through the document and ensuring that it does reflect as needed those references. So you can go through the document and see where it calls out the specific regs, and that helps us all just ensure that we're doing and following the appropriate regs and statutes. In addition to that, the other biggest change that we're seeing is just the separation of planning, where in the process the projects are listed in the TIP and not on the STIP. That is new over the last year. That hasn't been practiced in the past. So I think all of these changes warrant looking through these documents and ensuring that they reflect what and how we all want to operate moving forward, given that. So those would be the two reasons that I would say warrant this update.
Is there any section of the operating agreement right now that is not in compliance with the state or federal regulations?
I would say that every section here that has comments on it are areas that the State Department of Law stated needed to have and needed to be updated in order to be compliant in the way that they could recommend that the governor sign it. So I would say that all of those areas are things that fit that category. Some of them are minor, like when we say comment periods are consistent with FMAT's public involvement. Like that's just a typo that I think got missed in 2019. So we're changing FMATs and changing it to FAST. So some things are minor like that, but then, we tackle there's not that many changes. It's just kind of a handful of them, but in addition to the incorporation of the boundary change and updating that in the operating agreement.
I'll also speak to the NHS component, right? Historically, DOT funded projects, we showed in the STIP. You guys might have shown them for informational purposes in the STIP, but with the federal planning findings, that expectation has changed. The current operating agreement does not address the NHS at all, because it wasn't necessarily something under this group's authority. And authority is maybe not the right word, but there's some need now that this stuff needs to be shown in the TIP that we need to address in that operating agreement, how that coordination happens. So you see things like, here's the US statutory authorities around, proposing modifications to the NHS. And then further down in the agreement, you get to some of the language about cooperating, and this stuff pulling directly from USC and CFRs. Brett and I went through and put a table together and kind of, read the language. There's some language in here that does need cleaned up a little bit to more directly align with the CFR, right? That's some of what this process is. But a lot of the more substantive changes you see is addressing that NHS component that was handled entirely by DOT in past expectations.
I guess my follow-up, so regardless of if it's in the operating agreement or not, that's still a CFR requirement. Correct.
US code, I think, for the bulk of the NHS references, but yes.
So I guess there's a lot of, we could add CFR, USC, and Alaska statute references to this thing, make it 200 pages long if we wanted to. So that's just what I'm struggling a little bit with, going through this again, just to add a couple of specific references and not do it to the whole document, because there's a lot of enabling legislation. My next example is going to bring up this AS 1920-015, that predated safety law and creation of MPOs. So we're citing that section, but not all the safety law late enabling statutes that create MPOs. So I guess that's the crux of what I'm struggling to work through here.
Well, it would be great to keep kind of going through the document and then it might help illustrate the need for some of the changes. For example, section 5, this is 5.1. The previous text has said fast planning is a staffed
One moment,
organization.
Catherine. I think you don't have a follow-up.
Oh, are we done with section 3? I have
I don't
several
believe
more
we're done,
questions.
we're not
on
done yet
section
with
3.
section 3, so let's, all right, if you had another question, go ahead, Kellen. So,
Yes,
before we move on.
I'm looking up 23 USC 103. And if you're looking at that specifically, that seems to me to be the section of USC talking about the designation of national highway system routes and not the planning or capital improvement of NHS routes. Can you just give me a little more clarity what we're citing that section here?
Catherine, you want me to take this one?
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna pull up the more precise
So
subpart.
one
If
of-
you wanna start, go for it.
This reference is what gives the state the authority to deploy modifications. In the planning capital improvement process. It addresses a lot of other components too, but it specifically states in there that the state has the authority to propose modifications. But there's this collaboration. So it's getting at that integration of states and the nation's needs for the national highway, interstate highway system. And how that planning, when we say proposed modifications, right, that's the planning process. And so that is really the statutory authority for the Department of Transportation representing the state of Alaska to have authority over the national highway and what happens on it. There's quite a few other things in there, but that specific, gets it, the authority as well as the required qualifications. So that's why that piece is correct.
So you're reading this not to just include the designation and what is on the NHS routes, but the planning authority and capital improvement of those NHS routes.
Right.
Okay. So let's make some notes.
And Laura will have probably a more eloquent answer than
Just a note to the technical committee, if you want to read this section of US code, it does begin on page 160 in your packet, and that specific section is on page 162.
What was that page number again, Jackie?
Page 160 is where the section starts, and then 162 is the specific section that's highlighted. Libby has page 162 on the screen here. My read of the section of US code is this section of code strictly relates to designating portions of highways, NHS or not. And modifications to the NHS is simply adding or removing segments of highway to the NHS.
And Laura, you're reading this to include planning and capital improvement, correct?
that is what has been conveyed by the lawyer. I think footnoting it too far.
Okay.
Kelly, you done with section 3?
No.
You have more questions?
Can I ask about why we're citing AS 1920-015? With my preface to that being specifically this legislation predated the federal CFRs on metropolitan planning organizations. Whether this is in Alaska statute or not, it doesn't. You still have to follow the federal regulations, is my comment. So my question is, why are we citing this this section of Alaska statute.
Yeah, maybe a question of the medical. Detail one, all of them specifically statutory. I don't know, Catherine, if you have a better answer with that one, those are the questions for Sean.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I'm sorry, I'm getting my sound a little bit better here. But yeah, Callan, these would be establishing authority. And we do need both state and federal authority, depending on actions that we're taking. And we can't be in conflict one or the other. And when they do, that's when we elevate things to our attorney general. So here, the same one, whether it predates or not, this is still our relevant state statute that gives the authority detailed here.
All right, any further questions on section 3? Yeah, go ahead, Calvin.
Yeah, I guess I don't have a good understanding of this section of statute, AS 1920-015. I asked some questions to the borough attorneys, but you know, they don't really work with this regularly. Could you just give me an example of in the past of when a municipality has requested this assumption and when it's been given by DOT?
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the point, that municipalities in the past have not requested authority over NHS routes, which are the state's responsibility on the NHS system. So here, this says that, yes, this is an authority, that an assumption of responsibilities that could exist, but no such authority has been requested by municipality to do so. I don't have a historical context if that's ever happened in the past, but we're happy to look that up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that, I guess that's part of my thoughts and questions on this section, like not dealing with it. This seems like a super antiquated section in state statutes that just doesn't anticipate MPOs. And everything that was added to state statute after the establishment of MPOs, specifically AS 20-200 and on, you know, basically it subverts this, I guess. So I don't think it's, my opinion is, I don't think this should be in state statute, but I really don't think we should be citing this in our document, as I think it's a pretty antiquated section of state statute, which was established before MPOs, and we still have to follow the federal CFR. So I really don't think we should be citing this in our operating agreement.
Yeah, that's a good comment that we can note. And then, yeah, I'd recommend working with your appropriate legislators to look at amending it. Just those proposals are things we can put together if we want to update clarifying language, but you can also look at the intent here and whether it's a municipality or an urban area. I think what this is reading is that municipalities in general can, regardless of, even though it's within 19.20, have that authority. And another thing is with municipalities as a local governing agency, and I'm not going to get ahead of myself as not as a lawyer, but we can enter into agreements through our stewardship and oversight agreement with other local governments, such as the municipalities. So there's likely some clear reasoning here why this is municipalities and not planning MPO in this instance. But we'll ask those questions and then get back to you.
And my concluding kind of thought in this section is, my opinion is I don't think we need section 3.12 in this document, since 2/3 of it aren't relevant to us, they're only relevant to TMAs. I don't think we need section 3.13. I read that pretty clear that it's the designation of national highway system routes and not planning and capital improvements. And I don't think we need section 3.14 since it is specific to municipalities and it predated MPOs, so. I guess all the big changes in this section, I just don't think are needed.
All right, any other comments or questions on section 3? Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Going back to this, the middle one here, 23 USC 103. Is the definition of proposed modifications laid out anywhere?
Yeah, page 162. You can read that section, it's a pretty short section of US code.
And so is there a non-agreement of what that really means? As far as, the authority of the DOT to designate a system route or authority of the DOT to actually change the geometry of the road and the planning authority? Is that what the problem is?
I don't know why this section of US code is cited in the agreement. And I don't know throughout the history of the MPO if there's been any modifications to the NHS of this nature. Either designating or undesignated sections of highway as NHS.
We have done.
Partly I was just gonna say that with this particular reference, I mean, part of the relevancy here is that you see what's later is that it's talking about 23 USC 134. So by citing 103, it is establishing a definition for moving forward with 134, which is more substantive, talking about authority for projects on the NHS. And that is the one which will likely is referenced in later bullets. But that authority speaks to the fact that all federally funded projects carried out within the boundaries of a metropolitan planning area serving a transportation management area under this title, excluding projects carried out on the NHS. Everything except for things on the NHS then are selected for implementation on the approved tip. So the authority section is largely important because it does set that baseline. It's in a sense listing out your definitions and your acronyms in advance so that there's a tie in later sections establishing those authorities. So, you know, as we move forward, putting in clarifying language so we understand context, removing things if they are unnecessary, but we do need to look at that within the context of the entire document. So that we have the appropriate reference, like a footnote in a research paper, to offer that context. So just something to keep in mind.
Right, Tom?
I have one more broader question, if I may. Anyone from DOT can answer this. I'm going to just ask it. Is it a federal requirement to update the operating agreement to incorporate a new boundary?
It's a federal requirement to update it with any substantive changes within the operating procedures within an MPO. So when we look at that, considering both the change in the proposed boundary change, which we want to incorporate in here, and the change in programming of projects compared to how we were doing it in, you know, many years prior, are both substantive changes in how we implement our transportation program. So that's the only requirement is substantive, and substantive is a relative term. So.
Jackson.
Yep.
So the last two times we amended our boundary, 2013, I think, and 2021. We obviously didn't change the operating agreement. Did we get any pushback from Federal Highways on those?
No.
There wasn't quote unquote substantive change at that time.
No, I mean, we have this in writing from Federal Highways. There are no federal requirements to update the operating agreement at the time of the MPA boundary update. They're covered by the operating agreement and the MPA boundary, covered by separate sections of the CFRs. They're separate documents that require separate approvals. They're not inherently linked together. in our current operating agreement, we attached our boundary by reference. And included the statement that it can be changed. I think on mutual approval of the governor in there, but it is only attached to our operating agreement by reference. But yes, there is no federal requirement to update the operating agreement at the time of the MPA boundary update.
Yeah, thank you. That concludes my questions with section 3.
All right, any other questions on section 3? All right, in consideration of time, we should move on to the next section, section 5. Maybe you can go to page 155.
Okay, so section 5. There's only 2 changes proposed throughout section 5, which is organization and responsibilities. 5.1 changes the language which before says, or currently says, fast planning is a staffed organization with the state and public transportation operators. So we're clarifying this to reflect that the fast planning, it's the policy board of the MPO, which is established as a result of the designation process. And this is in accordance with 23 USC 134B2. So we clarify that fast planning as an organization is not just the staff, it's the policy board that is actually the designated organization, but that it includes the staff that cooperate with state and public transportation operators.
Any questions on section 5 here?
And then the second change is just another clarification on self-certification. On 5.5 MPO self-certification, it says every 4 years, the MPO will self-certify to the federal highways and FTA. But it's technically that the MPO self-certifies through the state because it has to go through the commissioner. And then as appropriate to a governor approval, then to federal highways and to FTA, which is something we just want to clear up because previously some tips have been going directly to federal highways and FTA without going through approvals at the state level, which has stewardship and oversight responsibilities over the MPOs.
Yes, Colin?
I'm looking specifically, it's page 8 of 21, section 5.1, the second sentence. So the current operating agreement reads, fast planning is the NPO staffed organization with the state and public transportation operators. And the proposed change is fast planning is a staffed organization that includes an executive director to cooperate with state and public transportation operators. I guess maybe I'm being a little dense. I just don't understand the difference between those 2 statements.
It's the sentence before, Callum. You need to read the first sentence, not start at the second one, to have the full change.
I'm reading that sentence as well.
So fast planning is the policy board, is what this is saying.
And that is in direct response to that report from the HWA. We work through the stuff. The MPO is also.
I understand that. They asked us to update the operating agreement to include that clarification.
No, we are updating the operating agreement to capture all of these things that have come up over the last year to make sure everything is crystal clear between the two, between the parties to the operating agreement, so that we don't have missteps in the future.
Okay.
And both FHWA and FTA have communicated in their federal planning findings to DOT very clearly that they want us to ensure that our 3C process is with the policy board, which then gets recommendations from the technical committee. We have before been working quite directly with the executive directors, and that was a finding that that is not representative of the policy board, which is in there for the MPO. So that is written through those formal documents. And so here, the update to this operating agreement is just stating that here as well, so that it's, you know, no ambiguity there.
Right, a broader question, if I may, has FHWA reviewed these edits?
Has FHWA and FTA reviewed the edits? I'm not sure if they have. They've likely seen them, but I would have to confirm if they have or not.
Okay.
As this is an intergovernmental legal document that extends beyond one federal agency, we would likely work on reviews after the interagency groups have actually had a chance to look at it and talk it through.
Exactly.
Okay, any other questions on section 5? All right, consider it final, let's move on to section 6. Ready to go to the next page, page 156.
Okay, section 6, this is key plans and programs. And there's several sections here, but only a few edits. 6.1.1 just talks about the MTP and just indicating here, specifying that it does also need to take into consideration the state's long-range transportation plan. So that's again, just adding clarifying language based on 23.450, 306. Yeah. 23, yeah. And the second comment beyond that gets into the NHS routes and how we propose modifications to NHS routes and incorporate NHS projects into the TIP. So it's a small section to work through a rather large topic of coordination between the agencies, but that's what 6.1.2 is about.
Are there any questions on these two sections? Okay, go ahead, Kellen.
Could you just give me that citation one more time? Is 23.450, 306?
Yeah, 306D4 and F.
That's not what's cited in the document, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So
I guess I probably need time to review those.
well, we can just stick with what's in the text here, because it is these same CFRs, but if we'll see if that needs to be added as a recommendation.
So the sentence, the MTP will take into consideration the state's long-range transportation plan. We obviously do this. Is that somewhere in statute or CFRs?
Then 134.
That's
and then
306.
134.
That's where I just saw it. That's the broader. view. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, my concern with this section is I could give you a whole bunch of citations out of state statute that the DOT plans also have to include all the local comprehensive plans, all local planning and zoning ordinances. I don't want to clutter this document up. So that's just a concern I have with adding this level of specificity with one particular topic. The MTP is obviously a very broad document. We could add 100 different citations in here, same with the tip. So that's my concern with being specific about what we're kind of picking and choosing with adding the specificity to.
Well, I would just, counter that this isn't just one of a large number of plans. This is the state transportation plan that establishes targets for all of our fundings, which also then rolls in MPO targets. It's a document that we all align our formula funding programs to. So it's not part of one of many of hundreds of documents. It is a primary one that is referenced in the regulations along with the MTP updates. So the reason for tying them here in an operating agreement is just to help draw the connection in the operating agreement versus having to go to a lot of this is putting it in one place. So these are guiding principles of the process here.
All right, any further comments or questions on this section 6 here? We just have one more page to get through. Some similar edits. Any more on this page? Page 156.
I get, yeah, just number 2, so 6.1.22. That's, I think, the most specific section of all of these edits. So maybe I'm being dense, but can you maybe tell me in simpler terms what we're trying to achieve with this one?
Yeah, we're trying to, with this section, avoid confusion between our planning processes, which then delays projects, critical safety projects. So that's the goal here. So what this is stating is through our 3C process, we're looking at projects that are on the NHS and identifying where we are all seeing what the needs are for NHS. The process in which projects get programmed when they are within the MPA is that similar to how we've been preparing like project updates in the past, this list of projects, including NHS projects, is provided to this committee for review and then programmed into the TIP. So it's not that the NHS projects are programmed in the STIP as we've done previously, because clearly that's a process federal partners have wanted us to update. So NHS projects are in the TIP and the state will prepare like that package of projects. And then also the fiscal constraint that demonstrates that additional revenue apportionment going into the MPO so that when we're preparing those fiscal constraint tables, that they balance out.
Thank you. My follow-up question to that, so it says then they will be incorporated by reference into the STIP. So state gives the MPO list NHS projects. It says they are incorporated into the TIP and then into the STIP. What if, I guess, theoretically, what if there's a problem with one of the NHS projects, like it's not in the MTP?
Yeah, I think our purpose of our 3C document is to ensure that we have things listed in the appropriate planning documents. And in the next MTP update, this is something that we'll want to, pay close attention to. When things are not in the MTP, but they are listed in the TIP, they are not able to be programmed in the TIP effectively. So for these projects, we do want to ensure that they are on the MTP as well.
Yes, it seems to me like kind of an oddly specific section that the state will provide the list of NHS projects to the MPO or corporation into the TIP. That's just my comment with that.
Yeah.
So that includes my comments in that section.
Okay, thanks, Kellen. Just so everybody knows, 6 or so minutes left of the meeting. So quickly, let's go to the next page, page 157 on the packet. These are the just kind of the final edits. Some of them are, similar to what we've already seen, but, actually pretty similar to what we saw on the very last page. So.
Yeah, section 6 goes on. Yeah, it's very similar language, just updating the FMATs to FAST. This, yeah, long range plan and the NHS projects. And I guess just the last comment to Callum is that, if you have clarification on language that you'd recommend that you think would speak more accurately to the process, we'd love to have recommendations back from the technical committee on these points. So very much appreciate the conversation on this and changes in language, sentence structure, those things. If we want to add more regulations for clarifying context or less, just let us know so we can work through this productively. So thank you.
All right, any final questions before we go to public comment? Okay, not seeing it at this time, but before we get to public comment, can I get a motion to extend the meeting to June 15th? Hopefully it doesn't take us that long.
I'll move to extend for completion of this item.
Okay. Motion made by Kellen, second by Bob. Any objection? All right, we don't have a time on it, so that's, we'll move forward here. Okay. Is there any public comment on this item today? All right, I don't see anybody in the room. I don't see anybody raising their hand on one item. So we'll go ahead and close the public comment period. At this time, we are looking for a motion on this item. Yes, John.
I don't really know what to do with this. I appreciate Ms. Keith and going through all the proposed edits. After spending hours with this and bouncing between statutes and CFRs and US code, my personal opinion is I just don't think any of these edits are necessary. I was involved in the 2019 agreement. It took well over a year, if I remember correctly, to work back and forth with multiple different attorneys and the board signature entities of this. I guess I'm still a little confused on if this is required or not required for the boundary. I think I'd like to treat the boundary differently unless Federal Highways slaps our hand on it. So my motion right now is going to be to, I move to table the proposed revisions to the recommended policy board to table the proposed revisions to the intergovernmental operating agreement indefinitely.
Okay, we have a motion made by Kellen. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Bob? Want to speak to that, Kellen, or open it up? I think you spoke to your motion before you made the motion.
I did try to explain it. I think we're just getting oddly specific in our operating agreement about specific areas. I think they'd be better addressed as past planning policies and procedures. We don't get this specific anywhere else in the operating agreement about different things. We could cite US code and state statute about 100 different things in this area. I think Federal Highways would be very amenable to having a past planning policy or procedure calling out how we work with the state on, different incorporations of NHS projects into the TIP. Again, I don't believe some of the citations in section 3 to be correct. And I just think we could use our time a little better as an organization over the next year plus than updating this operating agreement that was very, very recently updated.
Okay, thanks, Kellen. Further discussion? Yes, Bob?
Just a comment on Yeah, I'm not really clear on why the operating agreement is tied with the NPO boundary, given the determination from federal highways that you cited there seems to be an issue there. I don't understand that. And, there's a lot of work done here and, for me to make any kind of recommendation to the policy board for anything, I would have to study this a lot more. I just, a little bit overwhelmed by it. And, that's my comment.
Thanks, Bob. All right, committee members, any other questions or comments? Yes, John.
Yeah, if it's tabled indefinitely, what does that mean exactly? Well, it's gonna go to the policy board next month or this month is my understanding. And our recommendation to them, if there are new proposed edits, they could come forward, but tabling indefinitely is essentially putting the item on the table.
Would it be as proposed, just general?
Well, we're gonna have to update the operating agreement, you know, in 10, 20 years, something's gonna come up, but in my opinion, I don't feel these edits should go forward, but obviously it's gonna be a policy board decision. I guess one further comment to that, again, we seem to be maybe getting things just a little backwards. Last time, the state worked with all the signatory entities on the agreement before it got to the board level. So it seems to be a little bit backwards that we're starting here rather than going to the signatory entities individually. But my overall opinion is we go through that whole, you know, potentially painful process again. And I don't think it's necessary based on the what I've reviewed for this meeting.
Right, John.
What was the motion right now?
To recommend to the policy board to, table indefinitely the operating agreement edits. Thanks.
More
Yes,
questions? So this is going to the policy board as an action item at the next policy board meeting?
That'll be up to the board chair. But yes, it will be on the agenda. I don't know whether or not it will be an action item yet.
Will be on the agenda, okay.
The request from the commissioner was formal action.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other committee members have questions, comments, discussion, debate? Yes, John.
Would it be smart or an idea to have smaller discussion group than the technical committee? Or is this the smallest group requested, I guess? Like, could we break this down to like,
All member agencies at the table, I mean, with the exception of say the railroad, but the two cities in the borough are the signatories on this.
Right.
So this has not gone through legal review with their municipal attorneys. For any edits to be signed in this document, it has to go through the two city councils and the borough assembly to authorize their mayor to sign off the edits. So there has not been a legal review done yet, by the municipal attorneys. They obviously haven't met together to review them. But yes, there would be a group of attorneys and staff that would work on this outside of the technical committee, which would be the direct representatives of the agencies that sign the document. Right, any other questions? Comments, discussion, debate?
One more question. The policy board can decide what they want to do. If they want to direct the technical committee to come up with a recommendation after further review, they can do whatever they want the next meeting.
Yeah, whatever direction. you know,
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have a lot of options to refer this back to the technical committee or refer it to the municipal attorneys or
Right.
outside counsel. So,
could we refer to all that stuff as well?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Could we refer to them instead of going to the policy board and then getting referred to those folks?
Yes, that could be a motion.
Okay.
I mean, the motion right now is to table it indefinitely, so that means take no action on it. I guess in my opinion, that motion would have to fail to change the motion to refer to legal review. Is there a conflict with each other?
So,
All right, John.
I think I would want it to go to that instead of just tabling it indefinitely and taking no action at technical committee.
I think we need to call roll on this first. This motion failed and entertain a different motion. You disagree with that? Is everybody ready for me to call the question? Okay. We're gonna call roll and again, the motion is to recommend to the policy board to table indefinitely the proposed edits to the operating agreement. And we'll start with the motion maker, Kellen.
Yes.
Online, RJ,
Yes.
Jacob,
No.
John Weinberger. See John's still in the meeting, but we don't have. We'll come back to John Weinberger. Michael Bradley, you're still in the meeting?
Yes.
Yemi?
I'm gonna abstain.
Stephen Hope,
Yes.
Kate has left the meeting. I believe Alexa has also left the meeting. Brett? No. John?
No.
Tars? Bob? Walker?
Yes.
And Bill Rogers.
Yes.
And I'm gonna come back one last time for John Weinberger, if you are available. Okay, at this time we have 3 noes and 5 yeses. I'm sorry. You're right, we have 4 noes. 6 yeses. 6 yeses. 1 abstain, 3 absent. Okay, so motion passes. Are there any other, I guess that's the conclusion of the motion. I don't think there's any other motions that we made at this time. Okay, we're gonna move on then to informational items. Real quick, unobligated federal fiscal year 2024 funding. I received an update yesterday that the $500,000 for Howell Street reconstruction for the design for phase 2 of the project is actively being obligated. I haven't seen it on the obligation report yet, but Brett, can you confirm or deny that?
Yeah, but Randy said they're working on it, so things are good.
In the project level conformity review.
That I can't figure out.
Okay,
I talked about that.
all right. Well, hopefully that shows up in our obligation report for the next one. Starting on page 166, we have the updated obligations and offsets. And pending the obligations. We did have 2 obligations, one for design for fast improvement program, that's for John Harvest. And we had another obligation, design funding for the Northern Region Signal Interconnect Stage 2. So a couple of them out the gate there. And no offsets yet. This year. All right, any questions on obligations and offsets? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to any committee member comments. Who wants to get out of here? Sorry for everything. Okay, we're gonna close the comments. Can I get a motion to adjourn? John, the artist, give a second. Walker. Okay, we are adjourned at 2:08 PM. Thanks, everybody, for staying a little bit extra.